everybody. Welcome to At the Root with Greg Kiper here on KKNW. Greg is a psychotherapist and holistic life coach. His practice is Kiper Counseling. Through his professional practice and personal experiences, Greg knows that without connection with ourselves, connection with others is near impossible. Because, after all, emotional connection is at the root of healthy living. So, if you are interested in connecting with Greg, you can go to his website, kipercounseling.com. There you can find out more about Greg. There is a contact form. You can find past episodes of At the Root, resources, even a link to his YouTube channel called Connection Through Awareness with Greg Kiper. There you'll find videos of the podcast and even awareness exercises. Now, I want to let you know that this week and next week are the last 2 weeks of At the Root here on KKNW. The podcast will continue. So for those of you that are used to listening, if you haven't subscribed before and gotten notifications when a new episode comes out, now's the time to do it because there is a lot more work to be done. It's just not going to be done here. So without further ado, hello, Greg.
Hello, Stacy.
How are you?
I'm well today.
Good.
Good to be back.
It is good to be back. So, we have been talking a lot about listening, which I have been trying to listen to.
Okay.
And
that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. And it's going okay.
Good.
Yeah. I don't want to say it's going well. That seems like an overstatement. But I am giving it the old college try.
Takes a while to get that awareness hooked in, doesn't it? I mean, just more automatic. It does.
Yes. And I do feel like there's a process. It's sort of like the process of like, you set it or you're doing it and you're like, well, there it is. And so that's good because I'm starting to recognize that. And so now I think the next step is probably like, as I'm saying it, to stop kind of mid whatever it is that I'm doing. Right. And then ideally recognize it before it even comes out.
Yeah, that just takes a while, right? Because once that happens, we've reprogrammed kind of, right?
Right.
We've got the new habit in place of the old habit going on.
So it's a healthier autopilot.
There you go. Healthy autopilot. I like that.
Right? I mean, I watched the movie Airplane, which honestly, I mean, it's so awful and so amazing simultaneously. It is such a time capsule of like what was okay then. But, Autopilot is one of the characters. He even has his own IMDb page. And, so what if Autopilot was, a good, healthy character?
Okay.
So there you go.
All right. Well, we have been recently kind of diving into how we all listen to each other in our daily lives and our relationships with others, and particularly in our committed relationships, with our partners or maybe close friends, whatever, something that we've really made a commitment to. How do we listen in those relationships? And our flame of reference.
I think that would be a frame of reference for 500, Alex.
Our frame of reference recently has been a lens of cognitive bias. We talked about that last week, or maybe the last 2 weeks. I don't remember. But this is something we all participate in to one degree or another. It's defined as a systematic thought process caused by the tendency of the human brain to simplify information processing. And we simplify it through a filter of personal experience and preferences, right? So this simplified processing can be helpful at times, right? Allowing for more efficient use of the bandwidth that we have available. But it seems to operate in an error state more often than not.
This reminds me of actually what I do for the show, my role. It is taking some complex topics, ideas, things that you're talking about, and based on my personal experiences and my bias, my analogies, et cetera, I am making it relevant to myself and hopefully making it relevant to others.
Yeah.
Which is great until it's not, is what you're saying.
Well, basically, this happens because the amount of information we have in front of us these days to deal with, it's immense, right? I mean, what is we only use 20% of our brain at one time or something, or 10%, I can't remember. But it still doesn't matter. That's the only bandwidth that we have in general, right? And it can be overwhelming with all the information that's out there. And if we don't have the processing ability to work with it all, we've got to simplify it, right? We've got to take shortcuts. And we simplify it by filtering some of the information, taking those shortcuts with the process. This doesn't have to be a negative thing, right? But often it becomes detrimental if the person doing the processing, let's say they are maybe lacking in critical thinking abilities, or they have deep-seated beliefs that counter looking at all the input, right, from all points of view. In this case, the shortcut that they take in their brain, in the processing, leaves out significant information and sensitivities sometimes that skew the result, and that's where the word bias comes in, right? The shortcut leaves out some important stuff, and cognitive bias happens. This is really automatically happening in our brains. These neural pathways are laid down and just operating away, right, every day. And thanks to neuroplasticity, we can change this. They can be changed. But that requires awareness and making conscious choices. And for many, that requires extra bandwidth that is not available, or they don't make it a priority.
Right.
There's all kinds of, I looked at like 10 or 12, I think, defined cognitive biases, by scientists. But two that I find particularly relevant in today's environment out there is one's called the fundamental attribution error. I love this one. And this is the tendency to overemphasize personality-based explanations for behaviors observed in others, right? And at the same time, we are underemphasizing the role and power of the situation, the influences on the situational influences on the same behavior. So a really basic example would be like someone is racing in traffic, cutting you off and driving like a maniac, and you're raising hell and calling him a jerk or a terrible driver, but you don't know that their pregnant wife is about to give birth in the back seat, right? So you didn't look at the situation, you just looked at the personality-based explanations. He's a jerk. Yep. He's a bad person, whatever, right? So that's a very basic example. But or vice versa, looking at the situational aspect and ignoring the dispositional personality elements of the person, right? In this case, it doesn't matter that the person, for instance, is exhibiting repugnant behavior indicative of negative personality traits. We choose to focus on the bigger picture of the situation and ignore the hurtful activity, and we filter it that way.
So what's an example of that? Like,
I don't know, without getting into politics, and I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I got to think on that one. Someone who is blatantly lying or making up something right to your face, but the situation around it,
we can justify it?
Yeah, you're justifying.
Okay.
You're supporting the situation. You're supporting what's going on. So it doesn't matter that those lies were told.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I mean, you can imagine this one, fundamental attribution error in this context happens a lot out there in public life. Right?
Yep.
I mean, everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere,
Like, well, they were a child star.
Yeah, right. That's it.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And the other bias I think we see a lot of today is the confirmation bias. This is a big one right now, I think. Rather reduce inconsistency in a situation by searching for all the evidence, looking for all the sides so that you're fully informed. We only search for or interpret information in a way that confirms our already opinion, our initial opinion, right? Which we believe strengthens and affirms that perception. So we don't
echo
go out.
chamber.
There you go. We keep looking for ways to reinforce our opinion and do not look at the big picture and all of the input. I think we see that a lot today.
So much.
Yeah.
I had a conversation earlier today, in fact, and I was saying a few years ago, I changed the word, or I struck the word but out of my vocabulary and changed it with and.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying my new challenge is going to be trying to strike the word wrong and instead putting the word different. Because I realized from our work that we're doing here,
right,
that I come from this idea that it's wrong or right, and maybe perhaps it's just different.
Right, black and white. It's not always black and white.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how often is it really black and white?
It's never.
Yeah, pretty much. We might think of some examples, but can't off the top of my head.
Even black and white photography is all about the gray.
That's true. There you go. Thank you, Stacey.
You're welcome.
So how does all this discussion of cognitive bias relate to our conversation we've been having about listening? So let's take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
We'll talk about it, and everyone can prepare to listen without bias.
There we go.
We'll be right back with At the Root with Greg Kiper.
Sometimes psychotherapy is not enough to get to the root of our illusions. Hypnotherapy with licensed practitioner Annette Kiper of Solid Insight can help. With hypnotherapy, it's possible to tap into what's beneath our layers of protection and resolve the illusions that stop us from accomplishing what we want. Hypnotherapy is a safe state of relaxed calm coupled with elevated mental awareness that allows for a deeper dive into our subconscious. Led by Annette, it's about understanding and loving ourselves and creating a deeper connection with others. Learn more about Annette at solidinsightnow.com.
Looking to reconnect with your partner, spouse, kids, or self? When the disconnect seemingly has been there for a lifetime and is impacting your relationships, it's difficult to determine how and where to start. But At the Root with Greg Kiper of Kiper Counseling is the perfect first step. Throughout each episode, Greg talks about establishing emotional connection with ourselves and others. He offers experienced advice, explanation, and resources to listeners. You can find past episodes on his website, KiperCounseling.com, or through his YouTube channel, Connection Through Awareness with Greg Kiper.
Hey, are you missing listening to this show is all about you with me, JDK Winnikin? Well, you don't have to. You can still listen to Greg Kiper's show, At the Root, and my show. It's a win-win in every way because you can download my show and his at Podcast One, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Don't miss a minute of either show and listen to them on your own schedule. So be aware out there that you can listen to both of us still. And isn't that comforting?
No other station delivers this much variety. Alternative Talk 1150.
Nope, where am I? Nope.
Welcome back to At the Root with Greg Kiper. And we have been talking about listening and the frame of reference through which we listen. And
Right.
you were talking about different kinds of cognitive bias.
Yeah, cognitive bias. It's that kind of a systematic way that we process thoughts, and through our preferences and beliefs and just habits and the way that things have gone forever, we develop these shortcuts in our thinking so that perhaps we can have more bandwidth to process more. But many times these shortcuts, these biases, produce biases.
Mm-hmm.
And that can affect the way we listen in the relationships, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about now. So, we've been trying to figure out why it's so hard to listen sometimes, right? Why is it so hard? Where do we go in our heads when someone is sharing a feeling or some information with us? Where does it go? And why does our ability to listen change situationally or with different people? Right? I mean, why can we listen really well to some people and not at all to other people? What's going on? What is that all about? I think it has to do with some of these biases, a lot of it.
Yes. Well, and even if we think about what the person's talking about in terms of interest level, then
Yeah,
isn't it based on our interest level and not necessarily, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
I'm thinking about like, well, maybe they're boring. And then I'm like, well, that's my opinion. Maybe
That's
they're
right.
not boring to them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe we are, as we so often do, running in our head that these people aren't right. I've got the right answer, right? We talked about that. We're going to talk about this more. We've been talking extensively about being present, right? Being in the moment. That's something that we talk about all the time on this show. In the here and now, being here. And this is certainly key to good communication and understanding. But I often hear from one partner in a relationship that they do not believe the other person is present in their interactions. I've told the story numerous times, I think, on the show that about the wife and the husband that came in one time, and she was telling me that, Dawn is just never present when we're together. And Dawn looked at her with just incredulously and me and said, Greg, that's just wrong. I don't get it. I am here right now. I've always been here, and I always will be here. And, obviously proximity was the requirement for his presence, right?
Right. Right.
And she just shook her head, I remember. But, of course, being present means more than being physically
right
in the immediate area of this interaction, right? It means being in the interaction with our mind, our feelings even, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our thoughts and feelings. The connection sought by one partner, we'll call him the bidder, if you will, the bidding for connections,
Okay.
cannot happen if the recipient of the bid is off somewhere else in their head. So getting the attention of the recipient is the initial goal. And there are times this takes more than just starting the conversation. I worked with a couple, and as we were trying to work on this listening and being present, it was she mentioned that she has to do something fairly dramatic to get his attention. And once she has it, he's there, he'll listen, but she has to,
I'm pregnant.
pound on the table or,
I did that as a child. I was like 7 and I would be like, I'm pregnant because I wanted my parents to listen to me. So is that what you're talking about?
kind of, yeah. Well, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm in select drama.
Right. Okay. I guess that would do it. Did
Yep.
they listen?
I mean, they were like, oh, here she goes again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then when I started getting pregnant, then it got serious.
But yeah, so many times, until we get this down, we can't just start talking,
Right.
because your partner has not trained themselves yet to be aware of those cues. So, but let's say everyone in the interaction appears to be present, right?
Mm-hmm.
The listening can then truly begin, and this is the time when cognitive bias can make a mess out of things, right? let's go back. Let's say early in life, we were subjected to caregivers or our siblings or students or teachers, just people in our environment that unwittingly, or maybe wittingly, made us painfully aware that we were wrong much of the time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it happens a lot. No matter what we did or said, it was not good enough. And our interpretation, our perception became that we're just incorrect. We are just wrong, incorrect. And as the years went by, this is a big hit to our self-worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
I'm thinking of all of us ADHDers,
yeah,
where they say there's a statistic out there that I'm not going to get right, but a substantial percentage, it's believed, more than really any other mental illness, if you will, the negative self-talk for ADHDers is higher than most other.
Yeah,
because you constantly hear, no, stop, don't do this, don't do that, you're not doing this right, stop fidgeting or whatever. And so I'm thinking about that. And so many of us that have it, we hear all of that, and then you start to believe it.
Yep, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Yeah. As the years went by, this becomes a real hit to your self-worth, right? Because it becomes unbearable. And so we create coping mechanisms, right, to protect ourselves from the emotional trauma of those experiences. And many of us found that making sure our opinions and perceptions were heard first and foremost and loudest, that puts us in the position of being right. At least our perception is that, right? So get it out there and override everyone else. This was all automatic and unconscious, and it became part of our illusion, right? In our interactions with others and in our interactions with ourselves in our head, we adamantly informed whomever that we had the answers and they were correct. We're right.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I'll tell you. This knowing became part of our autopilot patterning, and for many of us, we have carried it forward into our lives today, manifested in our day-to-day interactions in the form of interruptions and jumping in without fully hearing someone else who is sharing with us. We all know someone that does that.
I feel like that's personal.
And we all know, and we can all sit here and pause a moment and go, "Oh, I've done that. I know I have," right?
Mm-hmm.
And this behavior can be masked during an engagement of great excitement and aroused emotions, right? I mean, we're just jumping into this excitement, but it is always still an interruption of the speaker, and not excusable as just joining into the enthusiasm. Because in many instances, the interruption has quite the opposite effect to the interaction, as it hijacks any intent the speaker may have had and immediately turns the focus of this engagement to us, right? Turns it about us. Without awareness, we can all be guilty of this, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Like depressingly so. So many conversations I think of that I wish I could go back because I genuinely didn't mean to hijack it and shifted the focus.
Right. And the problem is we don't realize until later. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, examples. Someone is telling us a story of something that happened to them, right? This is basically a bid for connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get triggered into a memory. And we jump in with, "Oh my God, that happened to me," right?
Guilty.
Or, "I remember when," or, "that happened to my brother," and you just carry on, and the hijack takes place then, right? It's over, and the conversation is now about you, and we don't do this intentionally, but it's a reaction from our autopilot illusion that what we have to say is more important or more relevant or more correct. Potentially, this is based on the coping skills we created for protecting us from those hits to our self-worth way back when.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to remember, though, here that this is automatic. It's woven into our reactive behavioral responses. And so by being automatic, we need to figure out a way to bring it into awareness and change it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk some more about that. So when we do this, we're not allowing for validation of the other person. And validation's important, right? I mean, that's what...
Yeah, big time.
I'm not talking about validating where someone is right or wrong or good or bad or whatever. I'm talking about emotional validation.
I was just
right?
going to say, I'm thinking of a conversation where, I have a friend group where it just so happens that a lot of us have sons that are around the same age, and they're all going through their growth and development at different, speeds and whatever. And so it would be easy for all of us to jump in and, oh, well, this is what,
Mm-hmm.
mine's going through or whatever. And instead, we try to, how does that make you feel? And, are you scared for them? Are you excited to have the time? And trying to remember that, they're sharing this with all of us, and we're a soft place to land. And they are having, as a parent, you do have all these insecurities and fears and worries and upset and maybe even disappointment about some of the choices that your kids make. And so to have a place where you can talk about it and be heard, that's really important.
It's really important. We all need validation, emotional validation, that this helps us to feel seen and heard. And we're not, by not interrupting, we're not trying to change or minimize the other person's emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do when we change the interaction to all about us. As soon as we switch it to all about us, we are minimizing the emotions the other person is feeling. Not intentionally, probably, but we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes their emotions in the moment less important than our emotions in the moment, right? What we've got to say. And in so doing, we're probably protecting those perceived hits to our self-worth using those coping skills that we learned a long time ago, right? They're not so valuable these days because it was X years ago. Let's say it was 25 years ago. Do we really need those coping skills anymore to validate our self-worth? I don't know. Maybe some people do, but I think more often than not, this automatic behavior is just carrying on in the background. And we don't even know we're doing it until somebody tells us. Right?
I feel like you're telling me right now. I'm like, this resonates so much. So for everybody that's listening out there that this resonates, it's okay. We're going to be okay. I mean, it's a hard thing to hear that.
It's a very hard thing to hear that. Mainly because we're not, as we sat here thinking about, it may be hard to hear about, but we are, we know we're not intentionally doing it.
Right.
And that knowing in itself can almost make us shameful, right? And then we go back to the self-worth piece. So
yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. And, I almost feel like the way to deal with it, of course, I'm making about me, and here we go, but to really let, especially a significant other or a good friend or whomever it is, know, hey, here's something that I've noticed about myself, and let's come up with a way when, you notice I'm doing this, or you feel like the focus is shifted, let's find a way that I can, react or have the feedback or whatever, but let you continue your thought. And then if we, the whole put a pin in it thing that a lot of people use in business, like, let's put a pin in that for a second.
Right.
And say, like, we're pinning it. We're remembering that we want to talk about this. However, let's let the person that was trying to make the bid for connection finish what they were trying to say. And then maybe that amount of time that we're allowing them to finish, we can decide if what we wanted to add is really worthy of adding.
Right. It's a good idea. It's great if we can do it.
Right.
Right. So many times I think we're just trying to join in the excitement, right? I mean, if it's an exciting, somebody's sharing something that happened and it was so fun and so whatever, and they accomplished something, and we just want to jump in and join that excitement. But generally, it happens a lot in like a one-upmanship type.
But we
thing,
even do it,
right?
Yeah, I think we even do it in negative things.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's not just the exciting things. I think there's also, the woe is me and I'm going through a difficult time. And I really, I was dealing with some depression, this past spring, I've, done this.
Oh, that's the worst thing you can do for someone who's
actually talking about it.
Expressing grief, right, is deflect to you.
Right.
Oh, when my mom died. Or, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or that happened to me when, I had to put my dog down, or whatever it is, right? Yeah, we're taking it away, stealing the thunder, or whatever you want to call it. In that case, it's not thunder, but,
right.
we're stealing the moment.
Plundering the thunder.
There you go.
I don't know why, but word game. Okay, let's take a break here because I feel like I need to lick my wounds a little bit.
Okay.
So keep listening to At the Root with Greg Kiper. We will be right back.
Too many relationships are adversely affected by wounds from our past. Lack of connection, unhappiness, shame, and regret are just some of the fallouts we experience when we choose to avoid addressing those wounds. Greg Kiper of Kiper Counseling is a psychotherapist committed to reestablishing connection with self to create greater connection with others. His work with teens, individuals, couples, and those struggling with substance use. If you struggle with old wounds or unhealthy narratives, get to the root of them in yourself by contacting Greg Kiper at kipercounseling.com. That's kipercounseling.com.
Whether it's fly fishing or French pastry, we all have something that makes our tail wag. Involuntary and instinctive, it's sparked by excitement, inspired by purpose, and it speaks to who we are. I'm Stacey Heller of Stacey Connects. I lead clients to the place that makes their tail wag. As a creative director, I bring ideas to life. As a podcast producer, I give ideas a voice. Stacey Connects. It's my superpower. If you want to connect with me, Stacey Heller, go to staceyconnects.com. Asking questions is better than making assumptions. Such is the premise of my show, Stacey Connects, a show about making connections through conversation. I welcome a diverse assortment of guests to chat about topics and ideas that are sometimes educational, sometimes inspirational, a little personal, and always entertaining. Every week, I draw out and befriend the elephant in the room so listeners can connect with the unexpected. Listen live Tuesdays from 3 to 4 on Alternative Talk 1150 KKNW.
Find out the latest about your favorite shows on Alternative Talk 1150. Check out 1150kknw.com.
Welcome back to At the Root with Greg Kiper. I mentioned at the top of the show that this week and next week will be Greg's last two shows that air here on KKNW. The show will continue. It will just be a podcast only. So if you want to stay connected with Greg and the show, remember you can always go to kipercounseling.com, and there you can get the latest and greatest. So after a good quick cry during the break where I basically said to Greg, legit, you know that I'm feeling all of this, right? And I'm feeling terrible about all this because I legitimately, this all resonates with me as the person that does the hijacking. I mean, for those of you that have been listening to the show for a while, you know I love the sound of my own voice. Greg knows it. Eric, our producer, knows it. Everybody knows it. So I have a tendency to do that. And the realization that you're that person is a heavy realization. And the fact that it's tied into that worthiness piece, it absolutely makes sense. I mean, going back to my silly story about how I used to yell, like, I'm pregnant when I'm 7, to get attention.
Right.
It all tracks. And so it's interesting that both parties, the bidder, the person who is trying to make this connection, is looking for validation and worthiness, and that I'm reacting because I need validation and worthiness.
Yeah. And in that reaction, what are you doing to the bidder's self-worth?
Right.
So it's like a cycle of cyclical almost, right? Where we take over the conversation because our self-worth feels better. But at the same time, we destroy or we hurt or damage their self-worth because we took over, we hijacked the conversation. And it's a lose-lose for both sides.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating thing that I'm willing to throw the person that I supposedly care about the most under the bus so that I can be seen and heard.
Right.
So, oops. And, and that's a huge eye-opening situation to find yourself in.
It is, and I think when I see that, when I find this in the couples that I work with, right, we're talking about these kind of things, right? We're talking about this, and one of the partners will come to this realization: oh my God, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see it in their faces many times when this realization happens that there's that place you can go to, right, with that shame and guilt of, oh my God, how long have I been doing this? Forever.
Right.
How could I be this way, right? And so it's really easy to go back to that shame and guilt feeling that you're trying to protect yourself from way back when.
Right.
It's a weird twist.
It's a very weird twist.
Yeah.
I will say that I'm sure my husband will listen to this later when it's the podcast, and he'll be like, uh-huh. I just wanted to talk about my day for a change.
Right.
And, and how I'm feeling about something.
Right. And the hijack is what we deal with in this self-worth thing. Right? We all want to be seen and heard, right? I mean, that's just human nature, I think, right? To feel important and worthy, that we are part of this universe. We are part of this, and we want to be involved. I mean, I think that's just human nature. And it seems like that there's this big struggle to protect and shield our worthiness, right? So, and in the process, what happens is we rob others of theirs, of their worthiness. So we can, anyway. How can there be a balance there, right?
Yeah, if I knew that, maybe I would be better about this. Well, and so then a question that I have then is, for both sides of the connection, this idea that obviously I need to be better about listening to my significant others, my interactions with everyone. So it sounds like, in addition to being a better listener, we also need to figure out how to have some self-worth ourselves. Like, not relying on other people, right? And, I'm thinking about past episodes where you've talked about going back to that core self, our true self, that inner child, and repairing those hurts from back there so that we feel validated by ourselves.
Right.
First
Worthy.
and foremost. Right. And worthy.
Right.
So this goes back to past episodes that you're talking about. This is a yes and. Yes, I need to be better about listening and not making it about myself, et cetera, et cetera. And I also need to find worthiness within myself.
But that's finding the worthiness in ourselves is when we want to listen to ourselves, right?
Ah.
We want to listen to what's going on and find our worthiness within that true self. You know, we don't have to hijack anything there and make it about ourselves, because it is about ourselves. I think the problem is so many of us don't engage in that conversation, if you will, with our true self, with our worthy self.
Yeah. No.
We don't, right? We packed that one away, and it's hiding away, and so in order to feel worthy, we hijacked somebody else's worth. Ooh, yeah. We steal it. We rob it.
Those looks that you're like, when I'm in couples counseling and I see a look on one of the persons, I'm like looking at you right now, and I know that you're like, there it is. There's the look.
Yeah. That's that hijack. We're stealing their self-worth in order for us to feel worthy. We're stealing their worth in order for us to feel self-worth. And our self-worth is really just, our worth is within us. It's there. It's always there. It's always been there. It's our true self. We just need to be able to find it and nurture it and love it and talk to it.
Right. I'm like, I don't
Right?
listen to myself.
No,
I don't listen to that other side of myself. And I'm all the things that you're talking about that, so if we don't listen to that, our younger self, our true self, our core self, then we don't allow for the emotional validation, right? So then that's not seen or heard, and we minimize the emotions around that because we're afraid of perceived hits to our self-worth.
Right.
But we don't care what we're doing then to that other side of ourselves. And really,
we're unaware of it.
Yeah. And so it's such an odd concept that we genuinely do need to have a dialogue with ourselves about this. Acknowledge the hurts, see how they've impacted our lives, our coping skills, the walls that we've built up. I mean, you have talked, listeners, go back to past episodes where Greg talks about the layers of protection and bandages that we put on and the coping skills that we develop. And, and here we are now.
Here's another one.
Ugh.
Well, once again, the nice thing about this is it can change. The nice thing about it. One thing that's good about it is that can change. We have to have awareness. Remember the change. How to have change is to bring awareness and have the 4 Ps and work at it with love and self-worth, concern for each other. And I think it really helps if we work at it with our partner. Right? We're going to talk some more about this next time, but being able to as we talked about a minute ago, realizing, oh my gosh, I do this. And sitting in that, and your partner is watching that aha moment also, right?
Sure.
And they're like, damn, it's about time, right? Kind of.
Right.
And so where does it go from there, right? I mean, where does it go from there? Is the shame and the guilt on your side going to overtake any progress that might be able to make? Hopefully not, right? And I think if we work on it, if the two partners work on it together, you know, learning together what these reactions and triggers are, and developing some cues like you talked about, so that we can change this automatic behavior to a different automatic behavior. It sounds easy, but that's essentially it. We just need to get rid of this automatic behavior we're doing. It's outdated. It's, there's no support for it anymore, right? We need a new operating system that has some support.
Well, and it has really stayed with me. You have talked in past episodes about this idea of being curious together. And instead of approaching a situation with judgment or anger or just this initial knee-jerk reaction that you have, approaching it with curiosity. What prompted that? Oh, that's an interesting response, or whatever it is. And that has definitely had an impact, thinking about things with curiosity. It's asking why, and going back to what you talked about with cognitive bias, right? And this idea that some people have the confirmation bias where you're in an echo chamber. And so by being curious, it may not change the way you think about something. However, perhaps by collecting more information, there's a curiosity there.
Yeah, curiosity of, oh my gosh, I did it again, didn't I? Yeah, you did. Interesting, you caught that, right? I mean, that kind of a dialogue between partners can lighten up this burden of change that needs to happen. And this is particularly big in the fixer bias that we talked about last week. That we're going to talk about some more, but when a partner realizes, I see this so many times, when a partner realizes that, oh, I am a fixer, and I've been doing this for my whole life that I can remember, and certainly the last 23 years with my partner, and the partner, I can see it in their face too, where it's like, oh my God, my partner finally gets it. I'm not crazy. I'm not.
Maybe, but
I'm not. It wasn't me. And being able to, at that moment, understand that and work on it together.
Yes.
Go on the journey. This is discovery now. Yep. We got the details. We've got the facts of the situation. We know what's going on. And depending on how long this has been happening, right? I mean, if this couple is, let's say, 55 or something, right? And this has been going on for 30 years of their marriage, and here it is out in the open finally, it can be pretty shocking, I guess. I'm trying to find a different word, but just so stark that for the fixer it can be, how am I going to change this after 30 years?
Right.
And for the other person, it can be,
how
long is it going to take this to fix it? Because I've been going for a long time, right? Right?
Clearly, I'm like, yeah. TikTok.
Well, and that's why it's so important for me, or for the engagement with themselves and with me, whoever they're working with, to take off on this journey together and make it curious, make it experiential, make it experimenting, make it, let's try this, that didn't work, let's try this, curiosity, so that we can fine tune it. And in the process, we're able to start being more vulnerable with each other, right? And that's the goal. The attunement is, right?
Yeah.
That mutual exchange of sensitivities, and that's vulnerability. Being able to be vulnerable with each other, saying what you're feeling and thinking, and not worrying about it.
There's two things that I'm thinking about as you're talking about this. One is a piece of like a gratitude thing. You know, this past week, for instance, my husband, he and I were talking about something. I was going to head out, and he didn't respond a certain way. And I was trying to listen in terms of both content and context. And content, I normally would have reacted and thought, you know, well, what's the burr up your butt? But context, I saw that he was working on something, and I said, you know, everything okay? And asked, and he said, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out some math. And so by listening, I didn't then immediately go to this place. And in that moment, I said, thank you so much for explaining, so that I understood both the content and the context. I didn't use those words exactly, but that's essentially what I was saying. And that was a really big moment to like acknowledge it in the moment, so that, you know, it sounds silly and I don't mean to trivialize it, but it's like puppy training, right? Like in the moment, it's positive reinforcement of the behavior.
Well, and that was a kind of a cognitive bias you could have experienced there, right? The fundamental attribution error, if you will.
Right.
You know, it's what's wrong with you right now, and it was nothing wrong. It was the situation.
Yep.
It was, you know, trying to figure something out.
Right. It had nothing to do with me.
Right.
Most things don't, sadly. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about is when you talk about the vulnerability piece, and that if you're in a relationship with your significant other, then this is the space that you're supposed to be safe to be vulnerable. And so there's a certain level of respect that comes with that.
Oh, yeah.
And so the idea of having enough respect for the person that you're with, that, you know, you allow them to be vulnerable and there's not that judgment.
Right. Well, being worthy, and we're talking about worthiness here, right? Being worthy is all about respect, right? Respect for ourselves and for the other, right? So, and I believe we can gain respect for ourselves by showing respect for others, and vice versa. And I think a good place to start with this is becoming aware of how we are listening. So back to the big topic at hand, right? And you know, we're gonna, before I get into this part about awareness and what to do with it once we have it, I want to because we're going to talk about how to fix what's going on now that we know what it is. How do we fix this? What are the steps, or what do we do now that we come to the realization that, oh my God, I'm hijacking conversations, or I'm a fixer, oh no, or, you know.
Yeah, that would be great. If you could get into that. I'm a little nervous about having to wait a week for this, because this is one more week of me unchecked. However, now that I have the awareness, I need to just try to be aware and try not to go down the shame spiral.
There you go.
So.
Well, and next week we're going to talk about the fixer bias a little bit more. We did last week, but there's a lot more to talk about in there, and I think your input will be good on that, since you are a self-proclaimed fixer.
I mean, I don't know. A Greg Kiper of Kiper Counseling. I'm going to go ahead and say that you could probably confirm this, but, you know, it's fine. We'll take that off the air.
Okay.
Anyway, so reminder, next week we're going to apparently be continuing the discussion talking about fixer bias. And remember that if you are interested in staying connected with Greg Kiper, you can do that by going to Kiper Counseling and find a lot of information about him. You can also follow and subscribe to his podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, because next week will be our last show on KKNW.
It will.
So what do you want to tell the folks out there?
Everyone, as you're going around out there, stay aware out there. See you next week.
See you next week.